As Dorian's hand touched the water, she transformed into a golden mermaid. Malboro watching her scream, then soon everyone in the river started screaming, "Mermaid, oh mermaid, oh!" The village men were alerted, and Dorian was still in shock looking at her scales. Malboro kept staring at her in unbelief. When the village men arrived with their arrows, they shot at Dorian, and Malboro ran to stop them, but the arrow hit her in her arm. Dorian shouted loudly, watching Malboro fall to the floor. Dorian was crawling to Malboro when the village men of Odik carried her and Malboro to the... There was a village named Odik. There was a forbidden river that was left abandoned by the villagers. And the stories of an evil mermaid had been told for many generations to the villagers, especially the men, to beware of the evil river and never go there. The elders of the village told the people of the village that anyone who ever went to the river would never come out alive, and everyone in the village feared and avoided the river except a man called Sunday. Sunday was a brave and bold man who never cared about anything the villagers said, and he had been sneaking to the forbidden river to fish almost every day since as he started his fishing business. And the following morning was a market day, and Sunday, unlike he used to pack his fishing net and went to the forbidden river, as he started fishing, his fishing hook caught something very heavy. Sunday was very happy, and as he pulled upwards, the surface of the water started to glow like a golden color and brighter. He didn't know what he was pulling out, but he kept pulling to the surface of the water. Sunday was shocked and grieved with fear when he saw a glowing mermaid unconsciously hooked by his fishing strings as he dragged her to the river, studying her body. The mermaid suddenly opened her eyes and pulled Sunday down into the river, and in a matter of seconds he was in a cage with shallow water and airspace. After all these years, "I have finally gotten a man," the golden mermaid said as she moved close to Sunday, caressing his body. Sunday begged the mermaid to let him go, but she refused. "I will make you my husband," the mermaid said, and every night she would lay with Sunday. One day when the mermaid wasn't around, Sunday tried to swim out of the cage, and when he managed to get to the surface, he weakly ran to the village. Everyone was surprised to see Sunday after months of being missing. When he returned, he told them his story and what the golden mermaid had done to him. After a few days, when Sunday thought everything was over, unknowingly to him that the golden mermaid was already pregnant for him, and she needed him to be with her when she wanted to give birth. The golden mermaid then swam to the shore of the river and started singing a song which got to Sunday where he was. The song pulled him to the river, and with Sunday by her side she gave birth to a female child. A villager saw Sunday being pulled mysteriously and told the other villagers, who noticed Sunday was missing again, and they all ran to the forbidden river and saw the golden mermaid with Sunday, and they ran towards the mermaid and stabbed her. Sunday was shouting, telling them to stop, but the villagers already killed the golden mermaid, and the baby in Sunday's hands was crying loudly. The villagers demanded the mermaid's baby must also be killed. Sunday refused to give the baby, and the villagers still insisted. Then he managed to escape and ran away from the village with his baby in his hands. Sunday went to another village where he worked tirelessly to help the baby, and he named her Dorian, which means mother's death. Dorian grew up to be a strong, beautiful lady, unaware of her past. Sunday only told her mother had died during childbirth. One fateful morning, as Dorian was walking down from a hill, she heard a strange noise of drums and celebration from a distance. It sounded very newly strange and appealing to her for some reason, so she decided to follow the sound. She followed the sound and got to a very large river where she saw some of the villagers swimming. Dorian could now hear the drumming and celebration noise louder, but couldn't see any sign of people celebrating. She entered the water and started swimming. Suddenly the noise and song became louder and clearer. It was from the water, under the water. Dorian was shocked, and she looked at the villagers swimming around the river. "Good evening, people. Can you hear the song from underneath?" But they only cast sarcastic glances at her. A girl named Malboro swam towards her. "Hello, which sound are you talking about?" she asked Dorian, who also moved towards her. "I'm hearing some music from under the water. Don't tell me you can't hear it. It sounds very bad." Before Dorian could finish her speech, Malboro suddenly vanished, pulled with incredible speed down under the water. Dorian, in shock, quickly followed. As Dorian swam downward, she saw two big mermen pulling Malboro, who was choking and gasping in the water, away. Dorian swam with great speed following them, and the mermen turned around looking at her in amusement and disbelief after swimming down for a few minutes. She finally saw where the drumming was coming from. a mighty kingdom of mermaids and mermen were holding a festival, drumming and dancing and dancing. As the men people saw the strange girls swimming towards them following their warriors, they quickly swam towards her and grabbed her. They brought her to the front of the festival, and a very large mermaid, Two Tails, swam boldly towards her. "Who are you? And how come you could get into our kingdom?" It was then that Dorian discovered she had been breathing underwater. "I don't know, I just followed the kidnapper merman," she replied, and this shocked the mer people more. She can speak underwater. "Impossible," they muttered to themselves. The two-tailed merman then swam towards her. "You're an abomination, and we don't like abominations." He turned to the mer people and shouted, "The gods have blessed us with 2 sacrifices today. It wouldn't be one girl like we are used to." And all the mer people shouted happily. They tied Dorian up and placed her with the unconscious Maboro and pulled them both to the center of the river kingdom, where a giant fish with sharp teeth was sleeping with his mouth open. "You shall taste good to our gods," the two-tailed merman shouted, and they threw both Dorian and Maboro into the mouth of the fish. As the fish swallowed both of them, Dorian's skin touched one of the fish's teeth and it broke her skin. As soon as Dorian and Maboro reached the stomach of the fish, her blood fell into the fish's stomach. The fish let out an extremely loud screech noise that immediately woke Maboro, and he swam away from the mer people. This was unbelievable to the mer people because the fish hadn't moved from that spot for centuries. The great fish swam violently through the water because it is against its rules to taste a mermaid's blood. Still making an incredibly loud noise, it dashed through the river, and after a few seconds it spat out Dorian and Maboro on the shores of an uninhabited jungle far away. As Dorian and Maboro landed on the shore, their hearts were pounding loudly, and they ran to the shores clinging tightly to each other. After a few minutes, Dorian looked at Maboro. "Are you okay? You were unconscious all the time we were at the mer people's kingdom." Maboro looked at her in panic, still trying to catch her breath. "Mermaid's kingdom? What do you mean, mermaids? Did we just come out from a very giant catfish?" she asked, and Dorian nodded. "We have to leave this jungle and find a village to stay before night falls," Dorian said, and they both went into the jungle. They walked for hours, each one clinging to the other in fear. They sang songs until he finally arrived on a walk path. As they walked a little further, they saw a signboard saying "Welcome to Odic Village." Dorian and Maboro quickly ran inside and talked with some of the elders of the village, telling them their story. They watched both of them skeptically and also told them the story of a mermaid they had slain years ago. The elders accepted them and gave both of them a room to pass the night. On the morning of the next day, Maboro and Dorian decided to continue on their journey but asked around for water, and the villagers directed them to the river where Dorian was born, unknown to her. They both went there with their pots, and as soon as Dorian's hand touched the water, she transformed into a golden mermaid. Maboro watching her scream, then soon everyone in the river started screaming, "Mermaid, oh mermaid, oh!" The village men were alerted, and Dorian was still in shock looking at her scales. Maboro kept staring at her in unbelief. When the village men arrived with their arrows, they shot at Dorian, and Maboro ran to stop them, but the arrow hit her in her arm. Dorian shouted loudly, watching Maboro fall to the floor. Dorian was crawling to Maboro when the village men of Odic carried her and Maboro to the center of the village. They put Maboro bleeding out beside Dorian, and they surrounded her and started singing, "Every mermaid must die." In Gogoro, "Every mermaid must die." Dorian begged them to help her bleeding friend, and she explained how she didn't know how this happened to her, reminding the elders of her previous story. Then one of the elders approached her with a machete. "Where is your mother, young lady?" And she answered him her mom died during childbirth, and her dad raised her on his own in another village. "Is your dad a fisherman by any chance?" The old man asked, and Dorian said yes in confirmation, pleading with them to save her bleeding friend Maboro. Then the man shouted, "I killed your mother, you this evil mermaid, you are the daughter of Second Right, the traitor who betrayed his own village." On hearing what the old man said, Dorian stopped and looked at the man. "What did you say, Mr. Man?" Dorian said with a calm, angry, shaky voice, and the man responded, "I said I stabbed your mother with this same cutlass I will use to end you." Dorian let out a scream so loud and powerful Sunday, who had been searching for Dorian all over the village, heard it. The mere people of the river heard that one of ours. The two-tailed king muttered, and suddenly water came out from the floor surrounding Dorian and Maboro, forming a large tornado. As the roaring wave of water surrounded them, the great fish came out opening its mouth, and Dorian carried Marlborough inside the fish, and the tornado destroyed everything in the village of Odick as the great fish swam away. Dorian attended to Marlborough in the stomach of the fish as the great fish swam back to the kingdom of the mermaids. When the great fish arrived, all the mermen and the mermaid gathered in front of the fish, which opened its mouth as Dorian swam out. They all looked at her in amusement. "She's of royal blood," they said to themselves, and the two-tailed merman swam out again. "You are of royalty, you're always welcome in our midst, but I sense danger flowing through veins," he said. Then Dorian told him about the injured Marlborough, and he sent some mermaids to go nurse her wound. They then performed some findings to find out who Dorian's parents were, and they discovered it was the outcast Queen of War who was banished from the kingdom. Told them the story of her life growing up. Then it all clicked that she had both the blood of the land and the sea flowing in her. The two-tailed merman told her to call her father and tell him she was okay, but Dorian didn't have any means of doing that. "I don't know how that works," Dorian said, and all the men people around her looked at her smiling. "You called everyone in the kingdom a few minutes ago. That ability is rare for even queens, and now you can't call your father." The two-tailed merman said, smiling. "Anytime you hum a melody from your heart, the family member or loved one you're thinking about will hear you and come to you. That's how it works, and that's how you've always done it," he said. A mermaid approached Dorian and the two-tailed merman as they were speaking. "My king, the injured lady in the great fish will need to be treated at the surface. Our medicine is keeping her stable, but she can't eat our food." The two-tailed merman nodded to Dorian, and she went inside the great fish to see Marlborough, who was still shocked to witness everything that was happening. "Oh my God, you are a mermaid." "A golden one," Marlborough said, touching Dorian's tail, who smiled at her. "I will be taking you home now, plus I have to see my dad." Then Dorian horned, and the great fish closed its mouth, carrying them to the surface. Sunday, on the other hand, ran to his previous village and saw that the whole village was destroyed, and some armed men still remaining saw him and chased him back. "You and your daughter will both die," they shouted as Sigan ran back, assured his daughter was still alive. Suddenly, he heard a familiar song which pulled him towards the river in his new village. Then he met his daughter. Sunday ran towards Dorian and hugged her. Dorian told him everything he had kept from her, and she showed him her friend Marlborough and the great fish. Dorian told her father Sunday to carry Marlborough to a clinic to help her and reassure him she would soon be back. As Sunday carried Marlborough and went forward a few steps, a mob of angry men suddenly ran angrily towards Dorian and the great fish, and both quickly swam back into the river. Unknown to Dorian, her father and Marlborough had already been captured. The armed men from the village of Odick were now in an agreement with the new village after they saw what Dorian had done to their village. They wanted Dorian and her father dead. They captured a prison, and after a few days of Marlborough getting well, they carried her to the shore and told her to call the fish and deliver a message to Dorian and the Mere people that they have Dorian's father, and she must come out with all the Mere people to save him. Marlborough told them she doesn't know anything about calling the great fish, but the men beat her mercilessly till Marlborough was crying in pain. The great fish suddenly jolted in the mermaid's kingdom and dashed out, swimming violently towards the surface, shocking everyone including Dorian, because no humans can connect with the great fish. As the men were still hitting Marlborough, the great fish jumped out of the water, biting and hitting the men away, and it swallowed Marlborough and swam back inside the river to the mermaid's kingdom. When it arrived, Dorian could tell Marlborough was inside, and she swam inside the fish to meet her. Marlborough, badly beaten, told Dorian what was going on and the war that's about to happen. Dorian was angry, and she yelled, holding her head, which also pulled all the Mere people closer to the fish. She swam out and told them the men on land had captured her father and they wanted war. Some of the Mere people shouted in agreement for war, but the two-tailed reminded them of the tales of Dorian Mom, the Queen of Chaos and War, and advised Dorian to go alone peacefully the next day and prevent war. Dorian agreed, and when the following day arrived, she got prepared, and she and Marlborough in the great fish swam to the surface. As they arrived at the surface, they met the angry village men in thousands, and the man who slayed her mom holding Sigyn in his hand, staring at her menacingly. Then he spoke, "We told you to bring the whole fish people, but you came alone. You disobeyed us, bringing a weak child and a dumb fish." Dorian swam forward, her tail turning into legs as it touched the shore. "I come in peace, mister. I'm sorry I ruined your village. I'm the one guilty, and I am the one to be punished." Dorian said, "Punish," she said, "Punished, you shall be put to death, little fish, but since you said punish, I shall punish you first by slitting your father's throat," he said as he cut Sigin's throat, and Sigin fell on the floor bleeding out, looking into Dorian's eyes. Dorian looked at her father choking on the floor, her golden eyes shone bright yellow, and she let out a scream that moved the whole river. The great fish roared with her, and her scream pulled all the mere people out of the river. A war broke out, and Dorian ran towards the man who killed her father. She used the wall of water to stop him from moving and marched towards him. She held his throat firmly. "I should punish you by killing your wife and kids, but I guess I already did that. I shall perhaps give you a more painful death. Choking you would be mercy," Dorian said as she carried him towards the great fish, who removed his lower body, munching on him gladly. Morobo jumped out of the great fish, hiding behind it fearfully. As some men came to attack Morobo, the great fish fought violently, being bruised by arrows and spear. Dorian fought slain men, and her anger only increased as she saw her dead father lying on the floor. The village men kept shooting arrows and recruiting more troops, but Dorian was filled with anger to retreat. All she wanted was all of them dead. The village men finally overpowered the great fish, and one of them caught Morobo beside the great fish. "Little traitor," he said, and he plunged a spear into her heart, which also penetrated the great fish. Both of them screamed loudly, which got to angry Dorian. Fighting violently, she turned around and saw the last string of her earthly stab. The great fish tried to fight, but he was already badly injured. As Dorian ran towards them, when she grew relationship to Morobo and held her in her arms, touching her fluffy hair, she died, and the great fish mourned his last breath. Tears filled Dorian's eyes. On a single day she had lost all her family. When the two-tailed men saw they weren't winning, he ordered his mere people to retreat, and this angered Dorian even more. She turned and stood up, lifting her hands. A wave of mighty waters from the water following her, and as she dropped her hands it crashed on her and all the village men on the shore, killing every single one of them. Since then Dorian was never seen again, as she had gone back to the ocean. Thanks for watching. Please do well to smash on that subscribe button, and please follow my page for more interesting stories like this. And do not also forget to like.